It wasn't a hunch. It was a cold certainty. After that strange, quiet meeting with my father, Richard, and my sister, Angela, something felt wrong. I found myself in the secure archives of Archer Digital Ventures, a place I hadn't needed to visit in years. I found it tucked away. A single black folder, no label, no project code. Before I tell you what I did next, I need to know, have you ever been the person doing all the heavy lifting while someone else took all the credit? Drop a yes in the comments and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I want to see who understands this feeling. My fingers traced the edge of the notarized document. Sterling and Stone Architects. Transfer of CEO title. 100% of voting shares. Beneficiary Olivia Stone. Not me. Not Cecilia Stone, lead architect, licensed structural engineer, and the person who had spent the last 12 years ensuring this firm didn't collapse under the weight of its own ego. My name wasn't anywhere. I scanned the pages again, looking for a mistake, a draft, anything. But the notary stamp was real. The date was yesterday. My father, Thomas, had signed away the company I built to my younger sister, an interior decorator who thought load-bearing was a suggestion. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The server room hummed around me, indifferent and cold. It was the perfect setting for a realization like this. 12 years. 12 years of late nights correcting my father's math because he refused to learn the new software. 12 years of fixing Olivia's design disasters before they became lawsuits. I missed my own engagement party because a foundation cracked on the Riverside project and Thomas was too tired to drive to the site. I went. I stood in the mud in my heels, directing the concrete pour, while my fiancé sat alone at a table for two. That relationship ended 3 months later. I told myself it was the price of ambition. I told myself I was investing in my future. I was wrong. I wasn't investing. I was being used. Thomas loved to say we were a team. At dinner parties, he'd wrap an arm around Olivia and talk about her spark, her vision, the way she brought light into a room. Then he'd hand me the technical manuals and ask me to double-check the wind shear calculations for the morning meeting. He loved Olivia. He used me. I was the utility bill he paid reluctantly. She was the art he hung on the wall. I had become the load-bearing wall of this family, essential, invisible, and impossible to remove without bringing the whole house down. Or so I thought. Psychologists call it the sunk cost fallacy. You convince yourself that if you just pour a little more of yourself into the hole, a little more time, a little more effort, a little more sacrifice, eventually it will fill up. Eventually, you will buy the love you're starving for. You think your competence is a currency. You think if you just work hard enough, become indispensable enough, they will have no choice but to value you. But that's the trap. They don't value the work. They value the convenience. And convenience is easily replaced, or in my case, easily ignored. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn a place at a table that was never set for me. I closed the folder. The cold certainty settled in my chest, heavy and solid like concrete. They didn't just overlook me. They erased me. My father didn't see a successor when he looked at me. He saw a technician. Someone to keep the engine running while Olivia drove the car off a cliff. Well, I thought, placing the folder back exactly where I found it. Let's see how far the car gets without an engine. I walked out of the server room and went home. I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room, watching the Chicago skyline, the buildings I had helped design glittering in the distance. They stood tall because of physics, because of math, because of the laws of nature I respected and Olivia ignored. By morning, the sadness was gone. It had been replaced by something much more useful. Clarity. The next morning, the sun was hitting the glass walls of the main conference room, so hard it felt like an interrogation. Thomas had called an all-hands meeting for 9 sharp. The entire staff, 40 architects, draftsmen, and engineers, sat around the mahogany table. I took my usual seat at the far end, the one with the direct view of the construction schedules. Olivia sat at the head. Thomas cleared his throat. He didn't look at me. He looked at the skyline. Sterling and Stone has always been about legacy, he began, using his boardroom voice, the deep, resonant tone that charmed investors. But legacy needs to evolve. We need fresh energy. We need to modernize. That is why, effective immediately, Olivia will be stepping into the role of CEO. The room went dead silent. A few junior associates glanced at me, confused. I kept my face blank. Thomas continued, talking about vision and aesthetic shifts and capturing the zeitgeist. It was a lot of words to say. He was handing the keys to the person who looked best in the brochure. Olivia beamed. She stood up, smoothing her designer skirt. I am so excited, she said, her voice light and airy. We're going to shake things up. Less grid, more flow. For example, the Helix Tower project. I was looking at the renderings last night, and frankly, the structural supports in the atrium feel heavy. They bring down the vibe. I want to open that up. Let's focus on the light. I felt the blood drain from my face. The Helix Tower was a $22 million project. It was a 50-story glass spiral sitting on a windy lakeshore. Those heavy supports she wanted to remove weren't aesthetic choices. They were the reason the building wouldn't torque itself apart in a winter storm. Olivia, I said, my voice steady. Those are shear walls. You can't remove them. The wind load at that elevation requires. See, she interrupted, turning to Thomas with a sigh. This is exactly what I mean. Negative energy. We're brainstorming, Cecilia. We're dreaming. You're always so focused on why things can't work. I focus on physics, I said. Physics doesn't care about your vibe. That's enough, Thomas snapped. He turned to me, his eyes hard. Let her lead, Cece. You're the technical support. She's the face. Let her handle the vision, you just make the math work. Technical support. The words hung in the air, vibrating. 12 years. 2 degrees. A professional license that carried liability for every single line drawn in this building. And to him, I was just the calculator he kept in the drawer. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I didn't try to explain the concept of lateral force to a man who had chosen to be blind. I just nodded. Understood, I said. I stood up. I walked out of the conference room, down the hall, and into my office. I closed the door. I didn't look at the photos on the wall or the awards on the shelf. I took a single cardboard box from the closet. I put my personal laptop in it. I put my framed degree in it. Then, I unlocked the top drawer of my desk. Inside sat a heavy, self-inking stamp. It was made of metal and rubber, worn smooth from use. It bore the seal of the state of Illinois and my name, Cecilia Stone, licensed structural engineer. This wasn't just a stamp. It was the license to operate. Without this seal on the blueprints, the city wouldn't issue permits. The contractors wouldn't pour concrete. The bank wouldn't release funds. Sterling and Stone didn't own this stamp. I did. It was issued to me, not the firm. I dropped the stamp into the box. It made a solid, heavy thud. I sat down at my computer for the last time. I opened my email. I didn't write a manifesto. I didn't list my grievances. I typed 2 lines. To Thomas Stone, Olivia Stone, HR, subject, resignation. Effective immediately. My license goes with me. I hit send. I picked up the box. I walked past the glass conference room where Olivia was still talking about light and flow. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door and into the cold Chicago wind. I hailed a cab. As I sat in the back seat, watching the city blur past, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. My phone spent the week vibrating off the edge of the coffee table. 47 missed calls from Thomas. A dozen voicemails ranging from "you're being dramatic" to "think of the family legacy" to a breathless "we need the password for the server, Cecilia, this isn't funny." I didn't answer. I didn't listen. I sat on my balcony, drinking coffee that was actually hot for once, watching the wind whip off Lake Michigan. For 12 years, I had woken up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, a phantom list of tasks ticking through my brain before my eyes even opened. Now there was just quiet. I heard through the grapevine a junior draftsman named Leo who was still loyal, that the office was a war zone. The engineers were threatening to walk. The city permit office had flagged 3 submissions because they lacked a valid stamp. But Olivia? Olivia wasn't panicking. According to Leo, she was redecorating the break room and telling the team that the tension was just growing pains. It's a psychological phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect, but in my industry, we call it the illusion of the empty suit. It's the confidence of the incompetent. Olivia wasn't scared because she didn't know enough to be scared. She looked at a blueprint and saw lines on a page. She didn't see the thousands of tons of steel and concrete those lines represented. She didn't see the wind loads, the soil pressure, the sheer terrifying weight of gravity waiting for a single mistake. She thought running an architecture firm was about picking finishes and charming clients. She was sleeping soundly because she was blind to the avalanche she had already triggered. I almost envied her. Ignorance must be such a comfortable pillow. Then, on Thursday night, the night before the big presentation with Catherine, my phone lit up with a text from Leo. No words. Just an attachment. Final_helix_pitch_deck.pdf. I shouldn't have opened it. I was out. It wasn't my liability anymore. But the engineer in me couldn't resist. I tapped the screen. The first few slides were exactly what I expected. Fluff. Mood boards. Buzzwords like synergy and organic flow splashed across stock photos of clouds. It was embarrassing, but it wasn't dangerous. Then I swiped to slide 12. The atrium render. I stopped breathing. I zoomed in, my fingers pinching the glass screen. It looked beautiful. It was airy, open, flooded with natural light, a cathedral of glass soaring 50 stories into the air. But something was missing. The sheer walls. The massive, 3-foot-thick reinforced concrete columns I had spent 3 months calculating were gone. All of them. In my original design, they were the spine of the building, the only thing keeping that glass spiral from snapping in half during a Chicago winter. Olivia had deleted them. She had literally photoshopped the structural integrity out of a skyscraper because it blocked the view of the lake. This wasn't just a design change. It was a structural impossibility. If they built this, people would die. My thumb hovered over Thomas's number. The instinct was automatic. The 12-year habit of rushing in to clean up the mess, to catch the vase before it hit the floor. I could call him. I could scream that his CEO daughter had just designed a death trap. I could fix it one last time. But then I remembered the conference room. I remembered technical support. I remembered being told my concern for physics was negative energy. If I saved them now, they would never learn. They would pat themselves on the back, sign the contract, and tell themselves that Olivia's vision had won the day, while I quietly fixed the math in the background again. They would never understand that gravity doesn't negotiate with vibes. I let my hand drop. I closed the file. I didn't call. I wasn't the safety net anymore. I was just a spectator. And tomorrow, they were going to walk onto a high wire without looking down. Friday afternoon. 2 o'clock. I was sitting in a cafe 3 blocks away, eating a croissant and reading a book on urban planning. I wasn't checking my watch, but my body knew. My internal clock, calibrated by 12 years of deadline anxiety, knew exactly what was happening in the glass-walled conference room at Sterling and Stone. I didn't need to be there to see it. I knew the players too well. I knew the script. Olivia would be standing at the head of the mahogany table, wearing something structureless and expensive. She would have dimmed the lights. She would be projecting the render, the beautiful, impossible, hollow shell of the Helix Tower, onto the smart screen. Thomas would be sitting to her right, beaming, the proud father watching his golden child finally shine. And at the other end of the table would be Catherine. Catherine wasn't a client you charmed. She was a developer who had reshaped the Chicago skyline before Olivia was born. She wore hard hats more often than heels. She read blueprints like other people read novels, for the plot holes. I could picture Olivia launching into her pitch. She wouldn't talk about wind shear or load distribution. She would talk about feeling. She would use words like luminosity, fluidity, and emotional resonance. She would gesture to the atrium, the 50-story void she had created by erasing the columns, and say something about removing barriers between the tenant and the sky. She would think the silence in the room was awe. It wasn't. It was the sound of a predator watching a gazelle limp. Catherine wouldn't interrupt. She never did. She would wait until the presentation was finished, until the final slide with the new, unreadable font faded to black. Then the lights would come up. I imagined Olivia smiling, breathless, waiting for the applause, waiting for the validation she had fed on her entire life. Catherine would lean forward. She wouldn't look at the mood board. She would look at the floor plans. She would tap a manicured finger on the east elevation. The wind load off Lake Michigan in February hits 40 pounds per square foot, she would say. Her voice wouldn't be loud. It would be granite. This design removes the primary lateral bracing for the entire eastern face. Olivia would blink. She wouldn't understand the numbers. She would pivot to the aesthetic. We felt the bracing was too aggressive, she would say, smiling that vacuous, confident smile. We wanted to let the light in. We prioritized the flow. The flow, Catherine would repeat. Yes, it's an open concept. That was the moment. The snap. The sound of a $22 million cable snapping under tension. Catherine would stand up. She wouldn't look at Thomas. She wouldn't look at the renders. She would look directly at the unlicensed, unqualified interior decorator sitting in the CEO's chair. You didn't design a building, Catherine would say. You designed a tomb. She would close the heavy leather folder in front of her. My legal team will be reviewing every contract we hold with this firm for negligence. If I find one more missing column, I will bury you. Get out. I finished my croissant. I wiped the crumbs from my fingers. I took a sip of coffee. It was 2:45. The presentation was scheduled for an hour. If my math was right, and my math was always right, they were currently being escorted out of the building by security. The collapse I had predicted hadn't taken months. It hadn't taken weeks. It had taken 45 minutes. Physics is efficient like that. It doesn't wait for your ego to catch up. It just pulls you down. My phone rang 42 minutes later. It was Thomas. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I didn't say hello. I just listened. She pulled the contract, he wheezed. He sounded like he was having a cardiac event. She kicked us out. She's threatening to report the firm to the state licensing board for gross negligence. Cecilia, if she does that, we lose everything. The insurance, the reputation, the license. Everything. I took a slow sip of my coffee. That sounds like a serious problem for the CEO. Stop it, he snapped, panic fraying the edges of his voice. This isn't a game. You have the original files. I know you do. You always back everything up. You can send them to her. Tell her it was a version control error. Tell her anything. Just fix it. I looked out at the lake. The water was calm, indifferent to the chaos burning down my father's legacy 3 blocks away. I can't do that, Dad. Why not? You're a partner in this firm. No, I corrected him, my voice ice cold. I was an employee. And I resigned. I took my stamp with me. I am not the architect of record anymore. I have no legal standing to submit those drawings. Cecilia, please. I'm begging you. It's the family legacy. The legacy you gave to Olivia? I asked. The legacy you decided I wasn't fresh enough to lead? You made your choice, Thomas. You chose vibes over physics. She's your sister. And you're my father, I said. But that didn't stop you from erasing me. I took a breath. This was the moment. The kill shot. I'm not the architect anymore, Dad. Let your CEO daughter handle it. I hung up. Then I turned my phone off. The silence that followed lasted for 3 days. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that hangs over a battlefield after the cannons stop firing. I didn't leave my apartment. I cleaned. I organized my books. I waited. I knew the math. I knew the burn rate of the firm. Without that $22 million contract, they would be insolvent in less than a month. On the morning of the 4th day, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was blank. The body contained 3 words. Name your terms. I didn't reply immediately. I showered. I dressed in my sharpest suit, a charcoal gray armor. I printed a single document. Then I walked back into the Sterling and Stone building. The office was quiet. People were whispering in corners. Olivia's office door was closed. I walked straight to the boardroom. Thomas was sitting at the head of the table. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 72 hours. His tie was loose. He was staring at the table like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. I didn't sit. I slid the document across the mahogany surface. Here are the terms, I said. He picked it up. His hands were shaking. He read it. 51%, he whispered. Cecilia, that's controlling interest. That's my company. It was your company, I said. Now it's a liability. You have a choice, Dad. You can sign that paper, transferring 51% of the equity to me, along with full operational control, or I walk out that door. And if I walk, Catherine files that complaint. The board revokes your license. And Sterling and Stone ceases to exist. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. What about Olivia? Olivia is removed from all design decisions effective immediately, I said. She can keep her title as a decorator, but she gets nowhere near a blueprint. And she reports to me. 50-50, he tried a weak attempt at negotiation. We can be co-partners. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. 51. Or I let it burn. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. He realized finally that the technician had become the tyrant. He picked up the pen. He signed. Tuesday morning. The corner office was quiet. Thomas had cleared his desk the night before. He didn't say goodbye. He just took his golf trophies and left. Olivia was gone too. I had sent a courier to collect her company laptop and keycard. The mood boards were in the recycling bin. I sat in the leather chair that had been my father's throne for 30 years. It didn't feel too big. It felt like a perfect fit. I didn't take this office for the view of the lake, though the view was spectacular. I took it because this was where the decisions were made, and I was done letting other people decide my fate. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Catherine, I said when she answered. This is Cecilia Stone, managing partner of Sterling and Stone. There was a pause on the line. A heavy, assessing silence. I'm listening, she said. Management has been restructured, I said, my voice level. Effective immediately. I am the architect of record on the Helix Tower. The open concept design has been scrapped. We are reverting to the original structural plan with the shear walls fully integrated. I'm sending the certified drawings to your inbox right now. I hit send. And the timeline, she asked. Unchanged, I said. We pour the foundation next week. I heard a sound I hadn't expected. Catherine chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. Good, she said. I prefer buildings that stay standing. See you on site, Cecilia. She hung up. The $22 million contract was back on the books. The firm was safe. The jobs of 40 people outside that door were safe. I leaned back in the chair. People might call this a hostile takeover. They might call it revenge. But looking around at the orderly stacks of blueprints, at the engineering schedules that actually made sense, I knew it wasn't revenge. Revenge is about the past. Revenge is burning the field because you hate the harvest. This was justice. And justice is about the future. It's the justice of the sower. When you pull weeds from a garden, you aren't doing it because you hate the weeds. You do it because you love the crop. You do it because if you let the parasites stay, they will choke the life out of everything you planted. Olivia and Thomas were the weeds. They were choking this firm with their vanity and their incompetence. I didn't remove them to hurt them. I removed them so the work could survive. I wasn't an arsonist. I was a steward. I pulled the fresh set of blueprints for the Helix Tower toward me. They smelled like ammonia and ink. They were beautiful. They were safe. I opened the drawer and took out my stamp. The heavy metal felt cold and reassuring in my hand. I pressed it into the ink pad. I aligned it with the bottom right corner of the title block. I pressed down. Thunk. The sound echoed off the glass walls. It was the sound of a judge's gavel. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut. It was the sound of my name, pressed in permanent ink, reclaiming the value that had always been mine. They thought my value was a title they could give away. They didn't realize my value was the competence they couldn't survive without. If you've ever had to walk away to prove your worth, share the story. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power.